I want to welcome everybody to the daily cheat sheet here with the dude and Golan. I want to remind everybody, it's always helpful. Go follow us everywhere. Give us that 5-star review. Share it with your friends. Share it with people you hate because you never know. They might end up loving us.
That's right. Howard Stern used to get listened to by people who loved him because they wanted to see what he was going to say next, and people who hated him because they wanted to see what he would say next. There's 3 of us. Imagine how much fun people could have.
Okay, perfect. Then I can move on. I just want to bring this up as a public service announcement before we start the show. I think this is really important. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was one of the most successful organizations to save lives. They saved millions of lives. You know, in the 80s, you had MAD and you had all these different organizations go on that were just incredible, set up by families that were affected by the effects of drunk driving, the effects of addiction, and all these different things. Now, there's a new study out that over 40% of deceased drivers in motor vehicle crashes test positive for THC, study shows. That is a massive number. I'll just read it exactly. In a review of 246 deceased drivers, 42% tested positive for active THC in their blood with an average level of 30.7 ng/ml, far exceeding most states' impairment limits. So I share that with people. Listen, I am a teetotaler, but I am not one of those people that has any issues with people drinking or whatever it is they do go on. But I think people don't realize that getting into the car high is no different than getting in the car drunk.
It's really interesting. I had not heard this, so I'm just kind of processing that as you're telling me. And it's interesting because I think about my history. I'm not someone who I don't smoke pot. I'm not really into that sort of thing, but I know a lot of people who do, not for no reason other than it puts me to sleep and doesn't do anything for me. But I don't look down at people who do that as long as they understand what they're doing when they do it. But I am realizing that while I was inundated throughout my entire youth about the dangers of drinking and operating heavy machinery or driving or what have you, I don't think anyone ever said, don't smoke weed and then do anything. It felt like that was just one of those things that was never talked about. So it's interesting because now that we're legalizing weed in as many places as we are, maybe it's time to have a similar, like you were talking, Mothers Against Drunk Driving was just about informing people, hey, not a great idea to do this because you are impaired. Maybe it's just a better idea to start talking about these kinds of things. Is there a law on the books that says if you are driving impaired by marijuana, you still get
Yeah, of course. Yes,
yeah,
there
okay,
is.
it's a similar kind of thing. I don't think people even are aware of that. I mean, unless they've actually been pulled over.
My bigger point though is this, man, this isn't a knock on people that use and smoke marijuana. This is simply saying to people, especially, listen, you're all of age that you could potentially have kids that are 20 years old. And when you're being lax and permissive, you're saying, in a sense, Golan, you're saying it's cool.
So here's the deal. Marijuana is 1,000 times less dangerous than alcohol. Hell of a lot safer. Should you do either of them? Probably
when you're
not.
driving?
No, not when you're driving.
No.
Okay.
That's
Right.
my
Probably
basic...
when you're driving too. You don't get as impaired, but I wouldn't recommend anybody drive on any kind of drug, especially alcohol or marijuana. It's a bad idea. And if you get pulled over, you will get a DUI. But as far as like how long it stays in the system, how long you're impaired for, there's a difference between it staying in your system and it being impaired. Because marijuana is fat soluble, people who smoke more and are fatter will have more THC released to their system for longer periods of time. It could be in your system from 2 to 7 days. So that doesn't mean that you're high 7 days later. So there's a lot of things going on there. But in general, if you told me that there was a choice between weed and alcohol,
that's not the conversation we're having.
You got my 2 cents for free.
But that's actually more dangerous, what you're saying. What we're saying is this is a conversation that has to be had. We always jump the gun on so many things. There's nothing wrong with having the conversation of, if you're going to legalize something, what are the repercussions of said legalization? And
that's what I was trying to get at is we're legalizing this stuff, but we're not actually educating people as to the effects of it. So they know it mellows me out, man, or I get more creative or whatever it is. But they don't realize that when I get behind the wheel, now again, I don't smoke, so I'm going off of what I assume is the case. I assume your reaction time is slower. I've driven in a car with someone who had smoked prior, and I remember them saying to me, I'm actually a safer driver because I drive slower to make sure I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, this does not sound right to me at all.
No, it comes down to reaction times. So with both alcohol and weed and any other drugs, unless it's like something speed, but most of the times you have delayed reaction. Of course, if you're driving down the road and it's, easy, flowy traffic, you'll probably be okay. But if a kid darts out from between two cars and you're coming down that road, you have a much higher likelihood that you're going to hit that poor kid if you're high.
Literally, that's the point. And also a very big difference. You're 51 years old, okay? You're at the age where you know your limitations, you know what's right, you know what's wrong. We're talking about people, often young people, that have zero idea of their limitations, that think they're omnipowerful when it comes to being high, drunk, whatever it is, and make horrific decisions based on that. And because a lot of parents, it doesn't have that same effect, they'll just call an Uber or do it at their friend's house. I'm simply referring to teenagers right now, especially where Mothers Against Drunk Driving really had an effect. That's what I'm referring to. When you're 17 and your brain isn't formed and you're getting high as a kite on weed that we know is so much more powerful than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there's a reason, there's a point in looking at this study.
I will tell you, a friend of the show, Guy Goldstein, once told me, he was talking about the difference between AI and human reactions. And he had told me that a driver I think they're exposed to like 10,000 pieces of information per minute. And the brain naturally filters out like 99% of them. I've never forgotten this conversation. But I imagine that if what you're saying is right, that your reaction time is the thing that takes the hit, then it's just like that filtering system not working right can go from efficient to fatal real quick. But I don't think people are even aware of this. And so to me, education is really the key.
I'm really talking about education as something for people to know. Listen, I just think it's important that people do. This might be the most boring 10 minutes people have ever listened to, but if somebody doesn't die because of what I said, or if somebody thinks about their children doing it because of what I said, then I'm happy.
As Golan likes to say, you got to inoculate your kids. You can't just leave it up to society to raise your kids, educate your kids, all of it. So with weed, we talk to our kids about that. My kid just went to middle school. So we had to have that discussion, talk about it. What's the difference? What is it? And I did not want to make that fatal error that most parents make where they say all drugs is bad, because they're going to encounter a vape pen with weed with one of their friends. Probably it's going to be one of the first things they're going to encounter.
Or in dad's desk drawer, whatever. Keep going.
And if they think that, or they were told that marijuana is just as dangerous as heroin, then when they see their friends smoking marijuana and nothing happens and the kid is fine the next day, then when the next kid shows up with heroin, they might go, they were wrong about that. They're probably wrong about this one too. So I, as a parent, make a clear distinction to my kids about the different drugs that are out there, especially when it comes to pills. And I show them the 11 seconds videos. It's on Instagram and TikTok. Every 11 seconds, a kid in America dies of a fentanyl overdose. And it's just videos of kids being kids. They're dancing around. They're doing their little TikTok things. And then the mother comes on and says, I lost her on this and this day. I lost him on this and this day. Show it to my kids. You might be at a party one day and one of your friends is going to say, here, take this pill. That could be the last pill you ever take. Be aware of that. So we're trying to inoculate our kids with that stuff.
And I also think it's important to say that there's been a massive decrease there was at least from 2002 to 2023 of 7.6% of fatalities due to alcohol car crashes. So we're witnessing the transfer from alcohol to obviously marijuana.
Well,
what we're talking about is a totally separate.
With the added tax revenue that they're getting, because the weed industry, the marijuana industry was around live and well for the last, since the 60s, right? So it's the outlawing of it hasn't worked, and legalizing it, collecting tax revenue.
You're missing the point. Nobody has brought up.
I know. I'm just making a
nobody has brought that up. We're simply saying,
I'm reinforcing your statement. I'm saying that now that it's legalized and you could collect tax on it, you should use part of that tax revenue to educate the public as to the dangers, pitfalls.
I used to say for every weed shop that you set up, there should be an outpatient program set up, a drug and alcohol outpatient program set up. I stand by that. There are not enough of those in the United States that are affordable, and that's my take on that. And I just wanted to bring that up.
I like making a difference. I think we did good here. Let's get to the news.
Well, that is news. That isn't.
Well, no,
That's,
that is news, but let's get to the news.
you know, I want to say something though before we start. You know, it's very interesting because we all listen to different podcasts and we all cite different podcasts oftentimes, and we don't all have the same taste, but we're listening to them for specific reasons. And I have to say, in my heart of hearts, there is no better podcast than the Daily Cheat Sheet. I will put Mend and you up against anybody to debate about foreign policy, domestic policy, not weed policy with Mend, but almost every other policy I will have you. I mean, I was listening to the interview you sent of Coleman Hughes and Dave Smith, and all I could think in my head was, if I listened to Golan and Mend talk about this subject for 45 minutes, I'd be a lot smarter. I listened to something for 3 hours and I got dumber. Okay. I mean,
I like Coleman. He's very measured. He's very in control of his emotions. So he doesn't get heated, which is actually a good thing when you're debating.
Judah pointed out something about that, which I don't disagree with, which is he's so measured, he doesn't go for the kill. And
Yes.
while
Yes.
I appreciate the kind of, again, like almost robotic howl from 2001 nature of his conversation, he could easily have destroyed Dave Smith, and it would have
Hey.
been really gratifying.
You look at me. I am hellfire and brimstone. When I get heated, like I go for the jugular. We try to not when we're debating.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've
between
never
us.
noticed that.
But I mean, out there, right? Coleman. It's the same problem that I think Winston Sears is having it's Virginia, right? She's running for governor of Virginia. She's so composed, well-mannered. She happens to be a black woman, and the opponents are coming out with knives. They are going for the jugular, and she's just, she has her head on straight, and she's just saying common sense things, and she's hoping that common sense will win out. Luckily for her, the AG, and that's the guy running for attorney general, is a lunatic, a psychopath calling for the death of someone's kids, as we spoke about yesterday. But, I hope she pulls it off. But she doesn't fight hard enough. And by hard enough, I mean...
I agree with you, but I miss the era when politicians were measured, serious people. I know that that's not the world we live in anymore. And I know I'm an old man, get off my lawn and all of that. But you could disagree with them. You could still respect them. I feel like now every time I watch an interview, they all try to curse to show how cool they are.
See, here's the problem.
I curse like crazy. I don't want to hear my politician. Just be an adult. I don't know. It drives me nuts.
Here's the problem. The average voter is an idiot. Okay. And that's just a reality. And that has changed through time. And obviously that's why I keep on bringing up that when Rudy Giuliani ran for mayor of New York, 55% of New Yorkers voted. Now it's 21%. And we're left with this psychopath today who, in his October 7th thing, calls what Israel has done to Gaza genocide.
You're talking about
Mamdani in New York.
By the way, let's just point out his tweet, not his Instagram post, right? Because on his Instagram, he has about 5 million followers. But on Twitter, very, very small following. And that's where he put it, because even the appearance of almost saying something nice for the Jews would have hurt his jihadi army. And so even there, his thing was like, man, October 7th, what a terrible day. And Israel is such a genocidal state. It was like, whoa, whiplash on your apology there, you piece of shit. So yeah, no, absolutely. This is the world we live in. I recognize we can't go back to gravitas. We can't go back to responsibility. We can't go back to, the idea of arguing ideas instead of arguing algorithms. But it makes me sad.
We've gotten to a point in politics where it used to be when someone was trounced, when someone was beat, they would hang their head in a little bit of shame and they would concede defeat, right? Or you had some memorable moments at the presidential debates where one side, take Ronald Reagan making a statement like about age, these things were just so good where everybody just said, that guy won. Now you have people on the Democrat side acting like Hamas, where even when they lose a debate, they still run around and take a victory lap as if they won. So the debate sphere, the atmosphere between people that have differences of opinion has become so dishonest these days.
Well, there's
no everybody's just looking for clickbait.
And there's no debate sphere. And that's why I brought up this show. And that's why I'm very proud of what we do, is because we debate in honesty. And I will challenge any podcast to do what we're doing. But the reason I bring this up, obviously, is because of and go on. I was just going to say to you when you were saying that Eddie Money had that great line. I want to go back and do it all over, but I can't go back. I know. And that Eddie Money was awesome. And but this thing with Coleman Hughes and Dave Smith. So these are people not familiar. Dave Smith is a wannabe comic that got platformed by Joe Rogan as his inside man for all things foreign policy. So Dave Smith, I don't even know how to describe this thing with Dave Smith go on yesterday, or this interview, but I just know this one thing. I bring up that scene from Good Will Hunting, right? When Matt Damon's going after the guy and he's keeps on quoting a book that he read, some arbitrary book, and he goes, next year you'll be reading this, and next year. So Dave Smith is reading some book from Meismeyer or whatever he keeps on, some author nobody in their wildest dreams has ever heard of. Maybe Tucker Carlson is the one that gave him the book by Meismeyer. Next he'll be on to Ian Carroll, and next he'll be on to Daryl Cooper.
Daryl Cooper.
Daryl Cooper,
exactly.
right. And go on, you're listening, and the reason it's so important for people to understand this is stop being indoctrinated by stupid. And it's a really heartbreaking thing that we're witnessing. We're not just witnessing the revising of history, we're witnessing the revising of the present. And it is, as you've brought up so eloquently so many times, it's so hard to fight this because by the time they're on to the fourth lie, you're still battling the first lie. So Coleman Hughes, I mean, listen, how do I explain this best about, I'll let you do it, about this Dave Smith, Wesley Clark thing. Because this is a big story.
Well, we talked about it a bunch yesterday too, but basically it was him using the only argument that he has that he can put something on the Israelis is using Wesley Clark, 4-star General Wesley Clark, as the source for this thing. It was happening and Israel was a part of it and this and that. And then it turns out even Wesley Clark himself was like, I actually wasn't in the room. There was a memo about it. I did not see the memo. But afterwards, I heard from somebody that the decision was being made as a result. So it was all hearsay, conjecture, wouldn't hold up in a court of law. As Coleman said, I thought brilliantly, if you were writing a history book, you would have to take this section out, because you wouldn't be able to back it up with any kind of facts, evidence, or information that actually had anything to do with reality or history. And then Dave Smith's, of course, answer, like every time, well, I'm not a guy writing a book. I'm just a comedian. The Bill Burr defense of, I'm a schmuck. Why would you listen to me? Thanks for listening to me for the last 2 hours. So this thing about Wesley Clark is just one of many examples that happen within that, but also that Dave Smith's been the whole grifter mentality. He misquotes things. He gives bad information. The first time I ever heard of Dave Smith was when I was still watching Rogan, and he was on, and he started. It was post October 7th, and he was talking about the history of Israel. Now, I happen to be pretty scholarly when it comes to the history of Israel, and I remember thinking everything he's saying almost to a letter is wrong. And I don't mean he's got a mistake here and there. I mean, like, his dates are wrong. His numbers are wrong. The sequence of events is wrong. Everything was wrong. So I went to YouTube and said, I got to watch this clip again to see. Maybe it's on me. I was sleepy. Who knows? I watched it again on YouTube. And then I commented, maybe the only time I've ever written a comment, actually physically written a comment on YouTube. And I just broke down everything that was wrong about what he said. Had no idea this guy was famous. And then a little while later, suddenly he was the guy debating Douglas Murray and could only hold his own against Douglas Murray because Joe kept interrupting Murray, and the two of them ganged up with their nonsense. But yeah, it's the same thing he does every time.
Man, I bring this up where obviously it's the 2-year. I hate even calling it the anniversary, but it's the 2-year anniversary of October 7th. And today you have the Ayatollah Khomeini, who comes out and says, Israel is now the most hated country in the world. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, man, the horseshoe has come into full effect. The Ayatollah is saying, obviously things Trump's exacerbating, I'm not, adding on to what Trump has said, but is just repeating the propaganda that he has fed to the grifter movement. Yeah.
The Ayatollah, the Hamas guys, they've all come out and thanked Canada, the UK, and France for recognizing a Palestinian state. We don't know the borders of that state. We don't know who the president of that state will be. We don't know who the security forces are. We don't even have them recognizing this so-called state, the right of Israel's right to exist, that it's a nation founded on ancient history in the homeland of the Jewish people. None of that. So who cares what the Ayatollah says? He's about 2 clicks away from being taken out. So he keeps on trying to revive his, well, somewhat the nuclear program, but really what they're doing now is they realize that when they lobbed 150 missiles at Israel or whatever it was, 3 or 4 or 5 got through. The next time they want to lob thousands. So they are ramping up their missile production capabilities. There's going to be another war. They're going to get smacked again. And these people will get smacked until they learn. I saw on X today, there were celebrations of the commemoration of October 7th. So the people in Gaza that have lost everything are celebrating it. They still haven't learned their lesson. So all those people that, like the Pope and the Cardinal who came out and said, oh, it's disproportionate. They have nowhere to go. Doesn't matter that they have nowhere to go. They started this fight. They started this war. And when you start a war, you're going to get a lot of death and carnage and buildings blown up and all of that other stuff that comes with it.
Man, the bigger point, though, I was making is it's a frightening thing when the Ayatollah and the leaders of Hamas are using the same propaganda that's being spread by the grifter movement. You've crossed.
I think it's the other way around. I think the grifter movement is spreading the Ayatollah propaganda.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I think that's exactly right. You know,
Yes,
you've
I
got
think I
people
said
who
that
are
before,
being,
but you're right.
yeah,
No,
but
hearing
I mean,
Dave
you've
Smith.
got people being paid off by a lot of these places, and the people who, and again, I want to make this clear for our listeners. There are certain people, like the president of Spain, like Tucker Carlson, who I don't have the documents, but we all know they're getting money. They're getting money from Qatar or Iran or Russia, probably Qatar. But there are other people like the Megyn Kellys of the world and probably the Dave Smiths of the world. They're probably not getting paid, but they are getting paid because of the clicks and the likes and the popularity they have by parroting the thing that fits the horseshoe. And so it amounts to the same thing, because what they have to do in order to get that horseshoe money is still parrot Qatari and Hamas and Iran and Russia and North Korea propaganda. So I think Ben's exactly right. Just like all those people who didn't know who bin Laden was and probably didn't remember 9/11 were paid through likes via TikTok to say bin Laden, great guy, and it turns out US is bad.
The clearest example of that talking point being regurgitated by these morons is that Iran only wanted to enrich to 90% so that they have a bargaining chip. So they only wanted to get a bomb in order to be able to trade it away for relief of sanctions. You don't understand. They don't really want the bomb. They just want relief from the sanctions which were put on them for creating a bomb. So this like demented thought process, and I've heard Dave Smith repeat it, all of the lunatics, you know, some of them are of Jewish descent, but in no way Jewish. Some of them are just rabid anti-Semites, and some of them just can't, you know, they can't help themselves. They jump on and pile on. But their argument as to why Iran enriched to 90% was so that it wasn't to get a bomb. It was so that they could trade it away in bargaining.
You missed that part of Dave Smith thing. It was brilliant. Coleman Hughes really got him on that one, actually.
It was wonderful.
Because Dave Smith brings up, and Coleman, he's talking about, we were negotiating with Iran, and Coleman says to him, can you name me one country that's ever been enriching uranium that actually never got the nuclear bomb? And Dave Smith's like, well, I can't tell you off the top. And Coleman's like, zero.
Another thing they love to say is that Israel blew up the negotiations by bombing Iran while they were supposedly sitting down, with the U.S. to discuss. That is not what happened. The president said, we will sit down and negotiate with you guys. You got 60 days. Day 61 came around. The U.S. and the Israelis in cahoots started taking out Iran.
Is airbrushed out of that entire. Nope, these aren't the droids you're looking for. It was just the Israelis that did it.
Golan, I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, Did they bring up the hostages at one point in that 3-hour interview?
I don't believe that they did. I think maybe Coleman brought it up at the beginning when he was talking about some of the events, but I actually don't recall hearing anything about the
Yeah,
hostages.
so
Do
you had
you?
a 3-hour interview about the October 7th massacre and not one mention of the 20 hostages. And this goes to Douglas Murray's point that that really the greatest thing they did, the anti-Israel people, especially in America, was ripping down those posters. It was you went from dehumanizing to dehumanizing even more, and where the hostages no longer mattered. Very sad.
There's a very simple thing that I like to tell people that really get into the weeds of the whole Israel Hamas thing. And it's this simple statement. If somebody broke into your home, raped your wife, raped your daughter, killed your brother-in-law, and dragged your son and wife and daughter into Gaza, what would you do?
Yeah, nobody could, you're right.
What
You're
would you do?
100. Can I tell you something? I'm actually going to make that into a post because you're right. It's one answer nobody has ever given. Nobody
Exactly.
has
What
ever,
would you do?
nobody,
What would you do?
nobody's
And they're
ever
still
said,
holding on to
yeah,
them. So let's
nobody,
not even say that. It's not even like, oh, it's 2 years late. That was 2 years ago. No. They're still holding on to your wife and
We're in
daughter.
the middle of.
We're in the middle of it. They could have given them back at any time. They didn't. What would you do? Fire and brimstone is what I would do.
just so you know, I'm stealing your thoughts. So thank you
Great.
very much. It's an exceptional point. It's not brought up enough. Go on. That really should be one
That's
of
it.
the,
You
one
don't
of
need
the
to get
things.
complicated.
So the goal, and there's this thing going around supposedly, and we know one of the people, that there are 14 paid influencers. Israel's paying for 14 influencers, $7,000 supposedly for a
Where do I
post. And I'm
sign
like,
up?
Yeah, right.
thinking to myself, if Israel is paying these people, these are the worst influencers of all time. Okay, the influence they have done is absolutely atrocious and negligible, and that's if the story's true. And who cares? But we know one of the people on it, and I have no doubt that that person might be getting paid to influence, which sort of disgusts me. I got to be honest with you, but
Right.
it was like, it really, like when Dave Smith heard that, I mean, it sort of, you could see him in his brain trying to twist that and how to get out of that trap of the dentist lobby. And the reason we're repeating this, and I think it's really important that you listen to people that have other ideas or same ideas, is because they sometimes come up with extremely interesting talking points and statistics that are completely true. Go on.
Also, I just have to say the whole concept of Israel paying influencers in order to beef up Israel's presence in social media and all of that. And then the list of people is a bunch of Jews that were already supporting and posting about Israel before this supposed operation went into effect. And that's who they thought was going to make a difference. They thought someone, I'm just going to use a name. Ooh, here we go. You can find it online. So I'm not speaking out of school. They thought a guy named Aton Fishburger was going to convince Mr. and Mrs. Middle
He goes by the
America.
fish. He goes by the fish.
The fish, and then the Joker on KTLA mornings. So they thought that was going to convince Mr. and Mrs. America that these are the people. Oh, wow. It's not like they went to Charlie Kirk and said, we're going to give you $7 million to post about Israel. It's not like they went to, I mean, what are they going to tell me next? They got Ben Shapiro, the Jews? I didn't see that coming. That's supposedly the scandal, is that they paid some Jews who already were posting about Israel as a thank you to keep posting about Israel. To me, this is a non-story, at the very least. At the most, it's a made-up story. And if it is true, then I don't give a shit. I don't understand why I would care about this at all.
Go on. If it is true, money returned. Okay,
No, but not money returned, because if they look, I'm being honest here. Israel is made up of smart Jews. Okay, there's no way the smart Jews thought, if I give Lizzie Savetsky money, it's going to change the white Christians in the middle of Arkansas's mind. They didn't think that. So if anything, they were like, thanks for your support. Here's some cash so you can keep going, because you don't have to get a day job, so you can keep focusing on these topics. They didn't think, I'm going to pay these Jewy Jews in order to flip everybody's political
it's not
alignment.
just that. You actually just touched on a point that's extremely important, is these people that are going above and beyond and posting will never work in certain areas in their life again. have lost all career livelihoods by going all out on this. And I think it's no different than things you've done. I think it's no different than things men's done. I want to move on though a little bit because obviously this is we can't gloss over
I'm just
October
gonna say,
7th.
I'm just gonna say, I would do that for free. And so if you
You
want to throw
do
me
do it for
I
free.
do it for free. And I
Yep.
could use the money. So if you want to throw me 7 grand as a thank you, so I don't have to go do my side hustle, great. I will gladly take it. It doesn't make me a paid off servant. It doesn't make me an operative. It just makes me someone who believes in the cause. And now it doesn't have to go distract myself with 7 other things in order to feed my kids.
But
So
that's
it's such a
but
non-story.
this is the narrative that comes from people like Dave Smith. I mean,
Of course.
and this is like it's the most convoluted listening to him talk. And the reason why, listen, he was at TPUSA, so it's important to talk about somebody like
Yeah.
this because they have a platform, they have a massive voice. He has the ear of Joe Rogan, and he's talking about stuff that's insane. That's absolutely insane. And listen, the term neocon was really a very tropey word. It was. It
Why?
was set
Why
up.
is that?
It was set up as a trope for the neoconservative movement that supposedly all supported Israel. That was Israel first for them, and they were all Jews or this or that. So that's really where, and it's not based in reality. When you look at it, when you look at George W. Bush's first term, the senior, it was not filled with Israel-loving people. When you look at
That's right.
Bush's second term, it was not filled with Jews or Israeli loving people. And in fact, everybody that they love to name, whether you name Rumsfeld or whoever it is, they're not Jews. Go on. So this
100%.
trope, because Richard Pearl, who ended up losing his son, got beheaded, and it was the Douglas Murray thing. They love to bring up Paul Wolfowitz, these low-hanging Jews
Right.
that had really zero power.
And it's always the same, like 6 Jews they pull out because that's all they got. Look, in reality, what's the irony of the whole thing? Real, I'm talking about, not neoconservative, like neocon as a dog whistle or something like that, but real neoconservatism was about, our favorite phrase, Judah, was about moral clarity. It just meant democracies have to confront evil and defend freedom and not retreat into isolationism and not be America alone. Recognize there are consequences to not doing things. That's all it meant. It wasn't about endless war. It was about conviction. It was about, liberties worth defending even when it's hard. That's it. So the idea that this has become a slur, and even worse, a slur that basically is just a nice way of saying Jew, it's ridiculous.
So, Mend, I want to bring up that morning 2 years ago. I was in New Jersey. Obviously, we were all in New York, right, during 9/11, and something you'd never think you'd witness or see again, especially being there.
I wasn't there for 9/11.
Oh, you were not there. It's right.
I
And
was in Costa
I
Rica.
was.
yeah,
I was.
and so was I. And I was also in Israel.
But I had a house right there on West Broadway. I was just a few blocks away in Tribeca.
But you weren't. The house was.
The house was. I wasn't there at the time.
Yeah.
I came back to it, and we still, the smoldering heap was right there.
That's why I got confused by that statement. Anyway, and it was in Israel when Rabin was assassinated. And I remember turning on, and I brought
I
this
was in
up
the
other
Army.
day, turning on my computer, watching Fox News, as what was going on in Israel and it was obviously it was very surreal. You could go on the whole day. 9/11. It was a horrific couple of hours, and the uncertainty of everything after that. But this was something on a whole different level because you had no idea what was going on in Israel, and neither did Israel know what was going on in Israel, as you had this continuous death rate toll. You kept on. It was from 100 to 200, and then it was and you're wondering where's the Israeli army? You're wondering all of those questions out loud because you think, what is it? Israel's the size of New Jersey. It just shouldn't take you more than 5 hours to deploy the military over there. And what people don't understand is go on the chaos on the ground. You had Hamas people wearing Israeli uniforms. Half the Israeli army was off because of the holidays. This isn't so. I understand people have a really hard time grasping the concept that sometimes evil wins. Evil absolutely won on that day. They took advantage of a weak moment in Israel's history. You had the judicial reform going on. You had numbnuts every Saturday night, screaming about judicial reform, something of such little consequence. Then all of a sudden, bam. And I just remember I'll never forget that day. Obviously, I'll never forget the emotions I felt. And I really want people to understand it's the same emotions I had on 9/11. I'm an American. I'm Jewish. My cousin I have a picture of my cousin was one of the first people to go into Gaza on a tank. And the tank got shot down. And thank God he survived. But all of us Jews have family members that live in Israel. And this isn't a Jewish thing. Honest to God, this is a humanity thing. If this happened, when this happens as men brings up to Christians, we scream about it all the time, but nobody listens to us. And the scary thing is, the grifters and podcasters don't talk about what men said. When I posted that 31 churches were burnt down in Canada, nobody knows that since 2021. Nobody knows that going on. So I don't know if I made any sense. It's very hard to talk about that day.
Well, like I was sitting right here at my desk. For those of you who have gotten to know me via the show, I don't sleep much. I'm not very good at it, and I had woken up very early that morning. I was doing something right here at my computer. My phone has the red alert system on it, sitting next to me on my desk. And it started buzzing. Frankly, like everybody else in Israel, this is part of the problem. They condition you. It's such a not a big deal for missiles to be launched over. You're just living perpetually with rocket fire overhead. That my brother, who works at the top floor or used to work on a top floor of a big high-rise building in Israel, would tell me, I'd be on the phone with him, the alarm would go off, and I go, "You got to go to the bomb shelter." He's like, "I ain't going all the way downstairs and the wasting my day and then come back up. I'm just going to sit right here. Let's just keep talking." So you hear the alarm going off in the background. You see the rockets being shot in the sky overhead through the window behind him. He's like, "All right, alarm's off. Let's keep talking." And it's not a big deal. Or friends of mine who grew up in the actual kibbutzim that were attacked. And they said the rocket fire was happening so often that they wouldn't go and run into the shelter when they were kids. They would run to the water tower, climb to the top of it with their girlfriend, because it was cool to make out to the best fireworks display they'd ever seen as those things were exploded. That's not normal. That's not normal when you're conditioned for that to be normal. And then the thing starts going off next to you, and it's like silence, silent. You keep pushing the button like it's getting annoying. What's going on? But this one didn't stop, and I'd never seen anything like it. And it just kept going and kept going, kept going. Then I'm texting my family. The hell's going on? The rocket alerts won't stop happening here. What's going on? And they're going, "We don't know either. The alarm is overwhelmed. But the thing is missing missiles because so many are coming in. It was overwhelming the system." And then the news reports start coming in. And then you start talking to your friends in the army, and they're like, "We don't know what's going on." And communications are getting tied up because everybody's calling everybody simultaneously. It was designed to confuse. It was designed to make everybody go into panic mode. And like you said, by the time you're done with everybody wearing different uniforms and even holding different weapons, which they flaunted a lot of the time in their videos, nobody knew who, what was what, anything. And there's a video of a bunch of girls in a shelter, and a guy walks into the room, and they go, "Who is that guy?" They're in a shelter. And it turns out it was one of the terrorists, but they couldn't even identify that was going on. They didn't even know to panic.
By the way,
Female soldiers. That's right. Female soldiers. And a lot of the girls didn't get out of there alive. And yeah, it's a day you don't forget. And I will admit, I was in New York for 9/11. I was supposed to meet at the World Trade Center early the morning of 9/11. I'd been there late the night before for a meeting, closed down one of the bars on one of the top floors there, and woke up because the plane hitting the building echoed so loudly that it woke the three of us up. We were in a hotel room together. We were there to pitch a movie to Steve Tisch, producer of Forrest Gump, and never got to. And that was a moment of more confusion and eventual panic. This was more constant panic. And it was worse, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, listen, obviously, without a doubt, I think having experienced both, it was 6 hours, man. It was 6 or 7 hours. Eventually, obviously, it was 12 hours till they were able to settle things down. And it seemed like it took forever. But even the best, sometimes intelligence services, even the best armies have their worst days. And there's nothing conspiratorial about that. It just happens. And they'll look into why that happened, and they have been looking into why that happened, but that's not really the point. again, every time people bring that up, you're putting the onus on the Jews that were attacked that day, the Israelis, the Arabs that live in Israel that lost their lives that day,
Christians.
the
I mean, there were
Christians,
52 French people that got killed that day. I
right,
mean, we're talking about people from all the different countries.
right, that got killed that day. And people again on that day are saying, well, why couldn't Israel defend themselves on that day? So it's like you're putting the onus once again on Israel.
On the
And that's
victims.
a fascinating thing.
I mean, I have the same questions. Of course, we all do. Like, how did it happen? How did you miss that one? Everybody's got that. Everyone in Israel has that. And there's going to be inquiries. They're already doing them as to the failings of October 7th. There are a couple of big ones that we know from the outset. One was Hamas did an elaborate campaign to convince the Israelis that they were more concerned with economics and getting that money from Qatar than they were with waging a war, and that they wouldn't want to do this. That was something that Shin Bet, the Israeli Internal Secret Service, should have had a better pulse on. They didn't. It was a
Well, it's
weekend.
actually more the Mossad, by the way, and the Mossad did have that report 2 weeks before, and that's a massive failure. And what you're witnessing right now, just I'm sorry to correct you, is such a problem in Israel because they can't just fire a Mossad chief. It's like this is such an this is what was going on pre October 7th, right? You couldn't, judges could only hire judges. Just so people understand what judicial reform was. It was to take away the rights of judges to be appointing other judges, like this crazy system they have over there. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, so one, it was they were lulled into believing that these guys were more interested with their economic status than waging war, that they wanted a good life and prosperity for their people. They didn't, obviously. It happened on a Sabbath when most of the army takes the day off. It happened on a Jewish holiday, Simchat Torah, which most people take off. So it was a culmination. I mean, but there was reports the night before weird things were happening. Thousands of Israeli SIM cards were all of a sudden activated inside of Gaza. They should have seen that coming. They saw it. They knew it, but someone didn't. I have the same questions, but that
We all
doesn't
do.
absolve the people that actually committed this atrocity and doesn't let them off the hook at all. These are two completely separate things. Those guys committed the atrocity. They need to pay, and they are paying. Great. Second part is they need to do an internal investigation, find out the failings of this war or this attack so it doesn't happen again.
Golan, isn't it interesting? And I agree with you, by the way, 100%. And Golan, isn't it interesting, though, the similarities between 9/11 and the aftermath in Israel and the aftermath in many ways, that you could really start pinpointing the grift movement after 9/11, and you look at that people just could not accept bad crap happened that day. It didn't mean there was problems in our government. It didn't mean that they didn't listen to all the chatter, because there was tons of chatter about 9/11. There was they screwed the pooch as badly as Israel did that day.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I
blame.
mean, but this is now with the internet again, like we talked about. You get paid and clicks and likes, and if you can push a conspiracy theory and get everyone asking questions, you're going to win the internet. That's why 9/11, we were still kind of in the earlier stages of that kind of stuff, but we had instant experts. It was overnight patriots that knew everything about metal
Alex
and how
Jones, right?
Alex
Let's call
Jones.
it who
I
it
mean,
is. Alex Jones.
but it wasn't just Alex Jones, man. Alex Jones was just the loudest and the dumbest. But you had a bunch of other people who were, just the armchair people who were talking about the conspiracies and
Rosie
Bush
O'Donnell and
vomiting in
Charlie
Japan.
Sheen.
There you go. But Bush vomiting in Japan, and they were talking about, how, all the stuff that we've discussed. How the temperature that metal melts, and all the people who never left New Jersey were suddenly Middle East strategists, and they were able to do a lot of stuff. They were able to get popularity. They were able to sell stuff. They were able to sell fear. They were able to do everything. And the same thing happened after October 7th. Is the hustle was it was the same old hustle with a different name within hours. And you're talking genuine hours, by the way, of the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Before, by the way, while the terrorists were still in Israel, before they had even resolved that part of it, hashtags were running, like lighting up on social media. All the explainers were live on camera. They were building whole careers off of it. And not only that, but of course, all of the terrorist organizations like Hamas aligned SJP, Students in Justice for Palestine. Don't forget, while we had no idea what was happening on October 7th, I'm not even talking about weeks afterwards while we were still piecing things together, but on October 7th, when Israel had still done nothing and won't do anything for weeks, and while the terrorists were still raping and cutting children's arms off and all the rest, Ohio State University had a campus protest that day calling what Israel was doing genocide. Israel hadn't started anything yet. Harvard University that day signed a letter from, I don't remember, 30 or whatever organizations saying whatever happened on October 7th is Israel's fault, right? And the New Yorker covered that story that early. You can SJP, the national chapter of SJP, on October 8th and 9th, were calling for a day of resistance. Israel hadn't done anything yet. If you want to understand the grift, go to the source. That's Qatar, that's Hamas, and that's SJP, and that's Muslim Brotherhood, and all the rest. Everything else stems off of that.
And plus, you know what the most frightening thing, Mendez? Everybody asks the questions asked backwards. I mean, every question that's asked is asked backwards. And MSNBC actually had somebody on, which was shocking, that actually said Israel's never allowed to win a war. And man, I got to be honest with you, this feels like 7 years. It doesn't feel like 2 years. That's how painful this is to witness and watch and live through, that it really feels like 7 years, not 2 years. If you were to say to anybody, I mean, I know they go on and stuff, they say it's, the 2 year, but God, man, it feels like 7 years. And you look at all these countries and all these people that just took the wrong side. I have a friend of mine brought up the other day, stop saying the wrong side of history, just the wrong side that didn't put the pressure and the onus on the barbarians. They put the pressure and the onus on the rape victims. I mean, it's something so extraordinary to watch in history as you're living through it, as you're living through the present of it.
And I encourage all of our listeners. Sorry, I just want to say I encourage all of our listeners to really think about this point. Because if any of you are on the fence or any of you are hate listening to us, so you can comment later on True Social or whatever, great. Listen to this part. Because when Russia invades Ukraine, what was said over and over again, whether it made sense, whether there was an off-ramp or not, everyone was like, resistance until victory, right? It was like there was no way we were going to stop until Russia was pushed back and America gets attacked on 9/11. And hey, whether we like or not what happened or whether it was true or not, whatever. We leveled two countries for 20 years in order to make sure that justice was done. Israel gets attacked, and this is every single effing time, but let's just use this one, right? Babies stuck in ovens, pregnant women slashed apart, all the terrible stuff you can imagine. The world suddenly finds its inner pacifist, right? It's like, well, what's the proportionality? Wait, how many days have you been bombing? Has it been long enough? How many people have been killed that have been used as human shields? How many tunnels did you need to destroy? Can't we just meet them halfway? Let's show restraint. This is something, no one says this to anybody else. Actually, I'm asking you guys, has there been any other time? Any other group of people besides the Jews who have been asked over and over again to chill for a minute after they got attacked?
It reminds me of the John Kerry meme where John Kerry is mediating peace and the Arabs go, we want them dead. And he turns to the Israelis and goes, can you at least meet them halfway? I mean, it's like we said the other day, every once in a while, as Douglas Murray said, a flare goes up and you see where people are. This war wasn't about trying to convince people not to be genocidal cheerleaders for the Pali Nazis. That's not what this was about. This was about for you to see where your friends stood. And my eyes were opened by a number of people that I thought were really good, decent human beings. They came out on the other side. And, the line that they love to use is, we just want to see babies stop getting killed. No shit. Of course we do. We all want to see that. Nobody wants to see any babies getting killed. The way you do that is you hunt down and execute every baby killer that started this war, every terrorist, every rapist. Those are the people, and that's how you fix this. They need to lose, and they need to lose badly. They need to be scurrying with their tails between their legs. Otherwise, they claim victory and want to do it over again.
They need to be destroyed. By the way, you can go back all the way to 1948 and see the same bullshit, where instead of Israel being allowed to obliterate, because they won, right? This amazing, this war of independence, this 5 Arab armies coming at them. But before they can actually just finish it and secure their defensible borders and really make it, the world said, hey, wait, we've got an armistice thing we're going to do. This, okay, this is what it is now. It's peace. It's through a pause. You didn't destroy them so they can't come back and do it again.
And you know what?
It's the same group of people
1948
every single time.
1948, you probably had 20,000 pro-Pally supporters worldwide. Now you have millions marching in the streets. And it goes back to what I say again and again, is you can't let these things fester. Israel goes, oh, we're a democracy. We don't want to kick these people out. We want to, welcome them and try to get them to, join society. And a lot of Arabs, Christian Arabs, Druze Arabs, and all these others, even a whole bunch of Muslims, joined the Israeli project and became full-fledged citizens. A lot of them didn't. The ones who didn't are the ones that were left over after the 48 and 67 wars, where their countries that attacked, Egypt and Jordan, lost ground. And those people should have been forced to migrate back to their countries. They didn't. They let them sit there and it festered. And now here we are, where people are saying, oh, let's carve up the little Israeli nation a little more and give these assholes a state of their own. And you have world leaders from France and UK. I mean, we never thought you would see this. A lack of moral clarity from the British, the French, the Canadians. I mean, all of these countries really got it that wrong.
Here we are.
But you know, by the way, hang on. Do you know the story, either of you, about Moshe Dayan? After 1967, after he had just won this massive victory, he decided, instead of annexing the areas that were taken during the war, and by the way, for all you legal scholars that don't know what the F you're talking about, when you are attacked, you can take land during a war, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. Imagine if I went over to Judah's house and just started killing everybody, and then I lost and I was like, never mind, I just left and we all just stayed what we had. Doesn't make sense. I have to get punished for what I've done. And so, sorry, you're wrong, those of you who think you're right. But he avoided formal annexation. He did it because he said he wanted to keep an open bridges policy, right? And he thought, just like every suicidal Jew who doesn't get the hint, if we give them an olive branch, then we'll make peace with them. So the same thing that was done over and over again. In this case, instead of kicking everybody out and saying this is Israel now, it became this permanently ambiguous thing. It wasn't annexed, it wasn't independent, it wasn't negotiated, it was just stuck. And it backfired, because what happened? The same thing that happened every time with these people is they attacked, and they attacked again. They didn't appreciate Israel's goodwill. He refused to make that political decision, and we've been paying for it ever since, because he may have been a great general, may have been a great leader, but he did not understand Arabs and he did not understand Arab politics. And the three no's of rejectionism that happened after that, the three no's of Khartoum, which have remained in place until today: no peace, no recognition, and no negotiations. And so if you don't understand their psychology, that's what they're looking for, is your hesitation. And it's the same thing I hope that Trump isn't doing right now with this red line that he is ignoring, that he put in place.
What I was talking about with Khartoum was the Arab League got together and they came out with this joint statement. It was all the Arab nations, 22 of them or whatever. Joint statement: no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. So they didn't want any of it after losing the war. So I am actually really
And by the way,
pleased.
think of all the countries who have been at war who did annex and then just took it as part of their country. So they got punished for a little while in the history books, and then that was it. Their country was their country.
That's it.
Israel gets to have this original sin of occupation shoved down our throats for the rest of time, thanks to this guy. And because we didn't kick them out, this demographic time bomb, because the three ways they want to take over is via the sword, via the womb, and via your idiocy, falling for their bullshit over and over again.
It's extremely frightening, obviously, as men brought up, the response that we saw. And if you listen to The World According to Ben Stein, I said this when Biden won. When I saw the fall of Kabul going on and I saw what was going on in the rest of Europe, I was screaming as high alert as possible of what we were witnessing going on around the world. One little base fell. I mean, I really want people to think about that. The base fell, 13 Americans get killed, a lot more injured, and you see this domino effect around Europe and across the world. But one of the things go on, and you keep on bringing on Trump with this, there's something we don't want to talk about that nobody wants to talk about. And that is some people, you just can't pull them up by by the bootstraps. They are different. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's racism. I don't think it's Islamophobia. I think it's reality. And when you look at, I'll never forget, I was in a car with a South African guy, gay as could be. He said to me when we were talking about apartheid in Africa, when they got rid of it, he was anti it, right? And I was like, how can
He
you
was
be
anti getting rid of it.
Yeah, he was anti getting rid of it. And I was like, how could you be so anti getting rid of it? And I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago, this conversation, 15 years ago, this conversation happened. He's like, do you know what's going on in South Africa right now? And I was like, not really. And when you look at the slaughter that's been going on in South Africa, now I'm not saying apartheid was correct in its basic primitive form over there, but it was really no different than what goes on in many of the other regions in that world, where there was a people that they needed to control because they knew once they let them loose, all hell would break loose.
Right. Dave Smith tried to pull this as part of his argument. Hey, even if murders rise, and even if crime goes up, and even if they rape and murder everybody, you got to give them citizenship because it's the right thing to do. We're a Western country. It's like, okay, no, we don't, because let's just use the American dream concept, right? That bootstrap story that you're talking about. If you work hard enough, you believe in yourself, you fix your own mess, you can rise out. It's like the Jordan Peterson speech. If Jordan Peterson went over to
He's really
Gaza,
sick, by the way. Supposedly he's like
really, I
deadly
actually
ill.
didn't
Not
know
doing
that.
good.
Yeah, like
Not doing
really
I had
deadly
no
ill. So
idea.
our prayers go out to Jordan Peterson.
Oh, I had no idea. Well, I was just thinking him at the height of his, clean your room kind of speechifying, going over to Gaza and giving that speech. I don't think it would have fixed anything because the system they live under forbids it, right? Islam forbids it. You can't bootstrap your way out of poverty when the local strongman decides your life belongs to God, and the only way to live a good life is to kill yourself by murdering a bunch of other people. You can't modernize an economy when the ruling clerics treat curiosity as sedition and dissent as blasphemy, right? How are you going to do anything when your education, when first of all, girls locked out of classrooms altogether, and boys are taught that martyrdom is the only career path? Like, it doesn't matter how many bootstraps I give you, you're not going to be fixing that society. Now, I guess if you were able to apply, and I'm talking about, again, we're going into Twilight Zone territory, so get ready, Rod Serling. If we could give freedom and accountability and proper education and a real rule of law and like individual dignity and who knows what else, all the Western stuff, get rid of all the corruption, get rid of all the rest, and then plant those seeds in the fertile soil of Islam. And maybe in a million years, 30% of them wouldn't be this way, but I'm sorry, they are. You know what? You can't call me an Islamophobe because I don't believe Islamophobia exists. So there you go. That's my take. You can't do it because they are not capable of it.
We all know that the Gazans, the Hamas, the Palestinians, whatever you want to call them, nobody else in that region wanted them. Okay, wants them. If they served any utility,
That's right.
they would want them. They serve zero utility other than death and destruction. I mean, is that an unfair statement, Golan?
Not only is that an unfair statement, people like to say to me, but Germany post World War II was denazified, right? And I always say the same thing. Do you know what percentage of the actual German population was part of the Nazi Party or supported the Nazi Party? By the time the war was over, like by the time Hitler had hit his peak, it was still less than 15%. It was about 10% all in. Right. And you're talking about a very small percentage that were actually committing the crimes, but there were enough supporting that you could go all the way up to 10, 15%. You have to flip that when you're talking about Gaza. You have to flip that when you're talking about quote unquote Palestine, because there it's 80 to 90% are the people that support the Nazis. And the idea that we can pretend that there is a separation between the Palestinians and the Nazis is a joke, but let's go with it. Only 90%, or let's be kind and say 85% of the people in Gaza support Hamas, participate with Hamas materially, help Hamas, or at the very least cheer them on and go to their parades when they're carting around baby coffins and all the rest. And I think that the question of how easy would it be to denazify that percentage of the population? Well, I look at it this way. My son comes to me on a regular basis, for those of you watching on Rumble or YouTube, and he brings me stuff that's broken. And he says, Abba, can you fix it? I have a whole piles of stuff around my desk. He says, oops, I accidentally punctured a hole in a box. Can you fix it? And I go, yeah, I'm really good at fixing stuff. So I go through piles of stuff. I fix it and I give him 3-4 things a week that I fixed. And sometimes he brings me something and I go, that one's so effed up, it ain't getting fixed. It's going in the trash. Do you get my metaphor?
Yeah, we get your metaphor. We can't bring democracy into the Middle East, right? The biggest mistake of all time was thinking you could nation build. You can't nation build in Gaza. You can't do it to people that don't want this. They have to want this themselves, and there's still overwhelming support. They haven't voted in a mass murderer in 80 years. And that's pretty much what I'm saying is you can't have wishful thinking and think this is going to end
in Gaza. The population and the leaders all pretty much want the exact same thing, which is the annihilation of the Israeli state. That's their goal, and everything they do is in an effort to achieve that goal. Everything that you're seeing is just an attempt to delegitimize, dehumanize, and eliminate the Israeli state. The PLO was invented while they still had the West Bank, which is what they're asking for today for their state. So they had that land, yet they invented the PLO while they were still in control of that land. So what are you talking about? You had it. You guys then attacked Israel and lost it. So why were you attacking Israel at that point if you had what you claim today is all you want? Because it's all bullshit. It's just made up. They just want to completely annihilate the Israeli state. And if they could take it one section, one part at a time, they'll take that. That they will take. They will take the West Bank today if you gave it to them as a state, and they'll still indoctrinate and train their kids that they need to go and kill everyone else over the border because they want it all. They don't want part of it. And why do they even want Jerusalem?
The only people that could uplift these people out of this situation is themselves. We can't force people to want to change. It's no different than trying to get an alcoholic off of alcohol.
In Gaza, they don't have to pretend they're doing anything for you because this life doesn't matter. So you have already been conditioned to know that I don't matter. The only thing that matters is killing the Jews.
That's
so as
right.
long as Hamas is killing the Jews, I'm good. I don't care what my life can be in the doldrums. My life can be in rubble. My kids can die. I can kill my kids myself, which they do a lot of the time. All of that. I can have more babies just to throw them into the meat grinder. It's no problem because this life doesn't matter. Gaza has a goal. And that's the thing that you can't forget this, and nobody else should either. Gaza's only goal, murder the Jews, destroy Israel. Nothing else matters. That's why you see them smiling and laughing in the rubble and celebrating October 7th today as their place is gone.
I want to thank you both. There's one thing that we did not bring up that I think is extremely important. And I said this before the show to go on. So Candace Owens is releasing these texts from Charlie Kirk. I am not judging Charlie Kirk's text. First of all, nowhere in there does it intimate or say in any way he was blackmailed. Okay, somebody deciding to say I'm not giving you $2 million because you do not think or you're not doing what I want is not that doesn't constitute blackmail. Okay, that is a donation that person would make. That you're in line with the
You have a right to decide where your money goes.
Exactly right. And I never judge anybody on their worst text messaging days. Okay. All I could judge Charlie Kirk on is the life he lived, which was a spectacular life. Okay. I do not want to be judged on my text messages go on because you've seen some of my text messages to you on my darkest days, and they could be downright scary. And, and I don't mean in a violent sort of any sort of way. And nobody wants to be judged on any of that stuff. So I look at these text messages and I go, so what?
I told you I had a fight with my wife earlier today, and then we were done fighting. But imagine if you took the snapshot of that moment in which we said whatever we said to each other in the heat of battle, and we're like, well, I guess divorce is imminent now. It's like, all right, sometimes you're mad about something. And yeah, I think Charlie knew in the same way that Candace Owens, even though she loves to talk about how she's the original, I don't know, stonemasonry exec over at Turning Point USA, she wasn't invited to things anymore. And the people inside TP USA have been pretty clear about there's a reason why she was no longer on the roster as much as she wishes she was. But yeah, there's a very clear indication that Charlie remained as pro-Israel as he ever had been, and was aware that Tucker was saying things that weren't great, and had acknowledged that too, against the Jews, against Israel, and said, but he's my friend and I got to stay loyal to him, and I can disagree with him while remaining loyal to him. Whether I agree or disagree with that sentiment, he said, I'm not going to be bullied into not inviting my friend, even though I disagree with him. And he kind of doubled down. And people I've spoken to off the record inside of TPUSA basically said the same thing. If you try to tell Charlie what to do, he's going to double down on you. And he did. He made sure Dave Smith and Tucker stayed on the dais, despite the fact that people didn't want them to be there. And some of those people were Jews saying Tucker is parroting Nazi propaganda and propping up the Qatari government and the Iranians. Maybe don't have him speak on your pro-America stage. And he was like, let's see what happens. And those Jews said, we don't like it because there's actual violence that follows what he does. So if you insist on him being on stage, I'm not going to give you the donation I would have given you otherwise. Again, not blackmail, a decision not to support an organization that is no longer meeting your needs. And he said, keep your money. I'm going to put him on stage anyway. That's the double down we know of Charlie. And so that's what it reveals. And so what? It has nothing to do with anything. So Candace, once again, trying to gin up some kind of controversy, trying to just jam herself where she doesn't belong, trying to, once again, go after Israel and the Jews, as always. Each time she does it, proof comes out that she's a liar and that she's just swill, just one of the trash heap pieces of shit of history. And then she comes up with a new grift and does it all over again until she's exposed once again. And this will also be exposed, even though here there's not much to expose. It's just a nothing burger.
So the Candace, Charlie, call it controversy. Basically, she came out and said that there are texts that prove that Charlie was being blackmailed. The texts were just verified by the guys at TPUSA, Turning Point. And they said, yeah, Charlie did get a text from a donor who basically said that he was not going to donate if, I believe, Tucker was on the panel or Candace was on the panel, one of the two. I'm not sure.
No, it was Tucker. It was Tucker. It wasn't. Candace was never invited onto the panel.
And right. Charlie came out publicly. I heard him say this, that some people want Tucker removed. And he goes, and I'm just not doing that. And that's his prerogative. He's allowed to do that. If he's running his network and he doesn't think that the things that Tucker say, the damaging things that Tucker says about Israel is outweighing the positive things that Tucker says about America, maybe that was his calculus and he goes, it's fine by me.
I'm trying to think of what positive thing Tucker said about America.
But it doesn't matter. If Charlie made that decision, I respect Charlie's decision. He's allowed to do that, and that's fine. And I also respect the decision of the donor to say, hey, if Tucker's going to be on, I'm not going to give. I agree with both of those things. I'm fine with both of those.
That's why
I'm
it's
fine with the donor
burger.
making his decision. It's not blackmail. And I'm fine with Charlie saying, hey, I don't care about your money, and I want to have this guy on anyway.
On that note, listen, take what you need and take what you need and leave the rest. We hope you got something out of this show. Here's the problem, Golan. Tomorrow's October 8th, and the war is still going on. The hostages are still there, and it's horrific. And all of us wish the world would just bring up the hostages, and the world refuses to bring up the hostages, and people in America refuse to bring up the hostages, and that's the atrocity. That's another atrocity in itself. So I pray for the hostages. I pray for all the people that are right, on the right side. And because, as you pointed out yesterday, after this is all said and done, we are going to see a lot of people that were on the wrong side. And they will be revealed, but there will be a price for that. There'll be a price for it.
We remember whose side people were on.
That's exactly right. On that note, I want to thank everybody. Remind everybody you can find us at dailycheatsheet.com. That's at dailycheatsheet.com. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.